Hello and welcome to another interview for my blog and podcast, A Rich Comic Life. My name is Richard Gill and my blog describes my experiences of watching over 1,000 comedians for nearly 50 years. I'm delighted to welcome my guest today. It's Mr. Tom Mayhew. Yeah! Hello,
Is this you going bananas, yeah?
It is, as you well know,
Yeah.
when I've seen your headline shows. It's brilliant. You're such a good comedian.
I mean, you're the kind of audience member who, there could be 8 seats in the front row and you're the only one there, but you're still as good as an actual front row.
I should get my laugh insured. That's what I should.
You
It's
really should. You
extraordinary.
should.
I don't
You
know
should.
where I get it from, but I just love, and I hope my blog and my podcast show this. I'm just so passionate about the art of comedy,
Yeah.
and to see you all up there doing it is just amazing. It's the best feeling in the world watching from the stalls, or watching from the audience.
Oh,
Anyway,
that's very kind of you.
this interview will last about 45 minutes to an hour. Thank you so much for being my guest. And we'll kick off with the first question. How did you become a comedian in the first place, please?
Well, I really loved comedy my whole life, really. And my family were always, really, really funny, and I wanted to be like them. And then when I was a teenager, I was massively into comedy. I used to listen to a lot of podcasts and watch a lot of stuff on YouTube and stuff like Mock the Week and Have I Got News for You and Live at the Apollo. And I just really, really loved it. And I knew since I was about 12 that I wanted to do comedy. That's all I've ever wanted to do.
Brilliant. And so from the age of about 12, you had this ambition to do it.
Yeah, I wrote my first joke when I was about 13.
Wow.
And I did that on stage when I was about 18 when I did my first gig.
Yeah.
Probably didn't do it that many times. I'd love to find out what it was. I can't quite remember. Probably something about being sad and lonely as you feel as a teenager, that kind of very you know, oh, I'm really sad. Like how other people would write sad poetry, I'd write sad jokes, I guess.
Well, what can you describe your first ever gig? Can you
It
remember it?
was February 9th, 2009. I know that. Or was it 2010? No, I think it was. Oh, I don't know. 2009 or 2010. I was 18, so it was
Yeah.
2010. February 9th, 2010. It was Laughing Horse New Act of the Year. It was a competition heat. I, had spent years kind of reading about different comedians, and I'd read about how a lot of them said that competitions were a big way of them sort of rising through the ranks and achieving success and going on to bigger parts of their career. So I thought, okay, well, I'm a new act. It's my first gig. I didn't realize that there was other new acts who'd done about 80 gigs, but there we go. So it was my first gig. It was a competition heat. I was very nervous. I spent most of the gig talking to a person with blue hair in the front row, just going, "Oh, I really like your hair." Like, I, I had that weird thing where I was so nervous that I spoke to the audience a lot, whereas I think
Yeah.
other people get really nervous that they are scared of the audience, whereas I just had the opposite. So my first gig, I'd already got over that idea of talking to the audience just through nerves, really. And I just spent loads of time talking to this guy in the front row about his blue hair and how I thought it was nice. And the gig went quite well. I got some laughs, which was the most amazing feeling the first time you go on stage
Yeah.
and get some laughs. It's like, God, I'm not completely wrong about this. I can do this. I'm not an absolute madman who thinks that this is funny and everyone just goes, no. You're like, okay, I've got some laughs, we can build on that. And yeah, that was the first gig.
What is wonderful is that your first gig was a competition. It wasn't like a 5 minute go in a pub where you take a friend along. It
Yeah,
was
well,
it was an actual competition, and you were taking part in it. I was going to ask you, what is your view of competitions in general? Do you think they're a good thing?
yeah, I think they are. I think they are a good thing in terms of helping people rise through the ranks, in terms of
Yeah.
giving people a platform. I think they're banned if you take them too seriously, which I think we all can be very guilty of. I've had times where I didn't get through a competition at certain stages of my career and was very, very upset and very annoyed. And
Oh.
I don't always think that's healthy, to be honest. But I think they are helpful. They are good at, sort of going, okay, we think these people are really 8 good people, and you put them in the final or the semi-final, whatever, and it's good for
Yeah.
showcasing those people and helping their careers. So I think they definitely are a good thing. And I also think like the biggest competition I've done was probably the BBC New Comedy Awards, and that was the one I was really upset about not reaching the final. I was gutted.
Right.
But then the producer kind of said to me, it's it's not about sort of reaching the final. It's just about, if it wasn't called the BBC New Comedy Award and it was just called the BBC New Act Showcase, I think there would be less of a interest from the industry, from audience members, from the public, and from comedians. Do you know what I mean? So I
Yeah,
think the
yeah,
whole
very
idea
much
of
so.
saying we're going to make it a competition, going to make it like an X Factor, to kind of follow their journey thing, it draws people in and makes it a bigger showcase, which is why I think they can be important.
Yeah, 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 very much so. So there you are, 2009 or 10. Uh,
2010, I've worked it out.
2000, sorry, 2010 was that?
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
2 months after my 18th birthday.
2010, right? Okay, and you do this competition,
Hmm.
and do you then think I can make a go of this, and then do the 5 minutes in the pubs?
Um,
What then happened?
well, I sort of thought, okay, I enjoyed that gig. I want to do more. But I only did about 6 more gigs the whole year.
Right,
Um, to be honest, I don't think I had the finances. I was still in sixth form. I
right,
didn't have any money to, often I'd be traveling to London at the cost of like 15 quid a time to do a gig, and I didn't really have the money to be doing that. And also, I probably didn't have the confidence to do it regularly. Like when I was
right.
18, I remember there was a lot of gigs where I applied for them and I got the gig, and the day before I'd really panic and I'd drop out because I was really nervous and really scared, and probably wasn't emotionally ready or confident enough, even though I'd done the one gig and done about 6 gigs. I wasn't ready to start gigging regularly till I was about 21. That's when I was in a better situation in terms of my brain, I guess.
Yeah. And when you were 21, was it like regular work in all the different comedy clubs around London? You were going nearly every night, were you?
Yeah, that was when I was doing 4 or 5 gigs a week, as
Yeah.
much as I could, doing whatever
Yeah.
gig I could, sort of, even doing a thing at times where you'd spend 50 quid to go do a 5 minute set in Manchester or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like things that you,
I've
you
heard so
say to
many stories.
you say to people who don't work in comedy you do that, and they think you're absolutely insane.
My home city is Carlisle, and,
Mhm.
and whenever I go, I've been in London half my life, but whenever I go back to Carlisle, there's a wonderful comedy club. It's like a comedy music venue called the Old Fire Station, and
Mhm.
I always go there because they always seem to do like new act nights, or the acts are there, and it's wonderful that the comedy clubs are available anywhere if you want to go and do it and travel and everything, and that it's a lot harder slog, I can imagine, than the average punter thinks, because you it's certainly, if you're traveling, it's taking up most of your day.
Yeah, definitely. It was, there was a lot of times when I used to work at Sainsbury's where I'd finish my shift, get the bus home, literally pick up my bag, go straight to the train station, straight off to the gig, and
Wow.
then you'd literally you'd spend your entire life either working or traveling or gigging. And there's a lot of that, and I think, especially if you just want to gig as much as you can and you don't mind traveling for 4 hours to do a 10-minute set or whatever it is, if you're those kind of
Yeah,
people, I mean, frankly, you spend far more time traveling than you do gigging. Like,
Yeah. What I find fascinating about watching a lot of comedians, and you included, is that whenever I see you on stage, you're very warm and endearing and enthusiastic, really, and determined to make the audience laugh. And even if you're shattered, it's like you've done it for your first time. You're walking out there to the group of people and saying, "Right, you're mine. I'm going to make you laugh." Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, definitely.
Yeah,
I always think it's important to remember as a comedian that, like, I'm a comedy fan as well. I love
yeah,
comedy. The reason I want to do comedy is because I absolutely adored it and I love going to see it. And I think you can't in your head let yourself think, oh, I'm tired, I don't feel like it, or whatever. You have to sort of go, well, no, if I was in an audience, I'd want someone to make me laugh. I'd want someone to
yeah, exactly.
perform. It's what it is. It's a
Yeah,
performance. And I
yeah.
think you've got a duty to your audience, whether they've spent a tenner or whether they've sat down for free. It's like it's their night.
It's
Do you know what I mean? And you don't want to be remembered as the guy who got on stage and was really miserable and was like Jack D but without the jokes.
what is very interesting is being an audience member. I've got a day job. I work at Wandsworth Council, and they can be long days. And then you go to the comedy afterwards, and you think, oh, I can't be bothered. But then it's so good. But certainly with my passion and my enthusiasm, I am exhausted at the end of it from laughing because I've enjoyed myself so much. And you're on a second wind walking home or getting the bus home or anything. It's wonderful.
Well, because you're very sort of I dare say famous or infamous. I don't know which word for being a huge comedy fan. And
Yeah.
like, have you ever left halfway through a gig? I can't imagine you have. But if you have,
What I do, I will sit through the gig, but if I'm silent, I'm polite as opposed to heckle the act because we're not there to heckle. These idiots who are in the audience heckling, we're not here to hear them. We're here to hear what the actor's got. But I go along. I go along with a lot of friends of mine who a very good friend of mine will lean over to me and he'll go, "I've heard this before," or there's somebody else will say, "Oh, you're too loud," or but I never look at it as being like too loud because a example comes into my mind where I once went to see an actor play Tommy Cooper on stage, and I was there with my then girlfriend, and we were sitting, and everybody around us, I was laughing really loudly at the actor. And when the second half came around, all the people around me had gone. And I'm thinking, well, if it's for my laugh, I'm not having this because this is what you want. You need the
yeah,
support. And so with the blog and the podcast, what's wonderful about the blog is that it's an archive, the blog, and I list every single act I've ever seen since the 70s, and it's like a record of everybody's different gig that I've seen, and it's just a wonderful thing. I've found such a unique thing. What do you like to talk about on stage? Do you have any specific themes or anything like that?
yeah. Well, I mean, it tends to be kind of influenced by what's going on in my real life and my
Yeah,
personal circumstances. It tends to be very much linked to my family. A lot of the time, they're kind of the inspiration for a lot of it. Even my family or people who are close to me, because I think my favorite comedy is when people are talking about, you know, stuff that you can feel their hearts in it. Not to say I don't enjoy other types of comedy. I'm perfectly, there's some excellent routines about that. I was thinking about Carl Donnelly's routine about a pot of shit earlier today, and that's
yes,
hilarious. Like,
yes.
that's one of my favorite routines ever. But when I write, I like to think, well, when it's my writing, I like to put a bit of my heart into it, and I like to think it should be stuff that's important to me. I don't
Yeah.
ever want to feel like I'm phoning it in. I don't want to feel like I'm doing material that anyone else could be doing, because what's the point of that? Like, you don't want to be the third person on the bill who's doing Tinder jokes or whatever. I don't
Yeah,
see the
yeah.
point of us all doing that, because unless you've got an incredible Tinder joke, which not many people seem to.
What's great is that every comedian that I go and see is different, because they've got a different story and a different upbringing and everything. And it's the same with the podcast. If you ask the question, every person you talk to has got a different story. So because of the different stories, it's wonderful to keep going and see so many like I've done, because it's not only in the delivery of the joke or the warmth that the comic will express to the audience. It's also the material itself, which plays a big part in it. And if you can relate to an audience, I can imagine you're halfway there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it's also important to have a perspective and to have an opinion, because I think sometimes people, they shy away from that because they go like, "Oh, I might upset half the people," but then I just think you might bore the other half by not having an opinion.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me about your writing process, if you've got one, for a routine or a show.
Well, I tend to kind of think of shows in terms of big topics or themes or ideas of things. Like my 2019 show was about when I was signing on for a long time on benefits. So I thought, okay, there's my topic, idea of writing about people being on better benefits. And I thought, okay, what annoys me about the coverage of that? And then I thought of the stereotypes and the sort of negative depictions of people. And I went, right, how can I take the piss out of that? And so I'd kind of pick a big topic, and then that would spring out into different directions where I think, right, I can write about this aspect, I can write about this aspect, I can write about whatever the opposite of that is, because then that's the opposite, and you can link them together. And it works for me a lot when I think of one topic and focus on that, and it can just spring out into loads of different ones. I can't just sit down and write
Would you
nothing.
say you're of the Billy Connolly style, where if he has a subject, he can just run with it and then go off on tangents?
I mean, if you want to say that, mate, I'll take it. Do you know what I mean?
Because I think you are.
Well, I might have to put that on my end of a poster.
Yeah, please do. Yes. What do you think makes a good comedian? You think all those processes that you've just explained?
Um, I mean, I think a good comedian is someone who loves comedy and who is always looking to get better. I think you have to always be trying to improve. Like once you go, right, I've made it, or right, I'm finished, then you're kind of just going to stagnate as an artist. I think you need to always be going, what can I do different? What can I do better? What can I change? Like, even if you have a really good show one year, the next year you should be going, right, what risks can I take? Because I think if you take risks, you're always going to be learning new stuff about yourself and about the art form. And I just think, yeah, maybe I'm talking nonsense, because at the same
I
time,
totally agree.
but at the same time, I am a massive fan of the Chuckle Brothers, and they very
Yeah.
much did the same thing for 30 years. So
You also write and have appeared in radio shows.
mhm.
Can you tell me the difference between writing for radio as opposed to stand up in at a gig, at a performance?
Well, the first difference is you're not allowed to swear. That's a big
Right.
thing. Which it does mean sometimes you have to go, okay, maybe that routine was funny because I said the F word, and maybe I need to fix that. But I think the main thing is you kind of have to be more aware of the different medium. It's like how, someone watching this as a video podcast would be someone who is different to someone who is listening to it as the audio format. So if it's a video podcast, I can lift up my mug and you can see it's a
I want one of
Fringe
those
mug.
mugs. I haven't got one.
Yeah, it's a mug from the Edinburgh Fringe that I thought
Yeah,
I'd
very good.
use especially for this interview.
Well done, thank you.
But for the audio listeners, I have to tell them it's a mug from the Fringe.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And it's just sort of being aware of different ways people are listening to it, and there might be a routine where, doing the live show, I could do that and it's a prop and people laugh. Whereas if it's an audio medium, you have to explain things and make sure people, and also sort of, there's a lot of stuff you can do in the live format where you sell your persona or your story or your act by what you wear. Like often I would come on, when I'm doing gigs, I'm usually always wearing tracky bottoms, and it's because I talk about class quite a lot and being
yeah.
quite skint, whereas they can't see that on radio, so you need to get that across in a different way. And it's just being aware of different mediums, which is I like it. I think it's a good skill to have.
It's good, and I always say, well, I can always imagine that the more you do stand-up comedy, the more you write and appear on radio or of all different mediums. It's all experience for you, because I can always imagine. I can't ever imagine you having a bad gig, but having a bad gig would make you a better comedian because you've got the experience from it.
Oh, we all have bad gigs, I'm afraid. I wish any of us could sit here and go, "Yeah, mate, I've never died," but oh, Jesus Christ, no.
But you agree with the principle because you
Yeah,
learn
yeah,
from having a bad gig, yeah.
yeah. Well, that's also, what makes a good comedian, I think, is self-awareness and being self-critical. Like, you
Yeah.
can't be someone who blames the audience every time. You have to kind of go, what could I have done differently? What could I have changed? Because that's how you get better and grow, and that's how you improve. But on the topic of radio, because you're known for seeing lots of live stuff. Like, are you as much of a fan of stuff on the TV or radio?
Yeah, very much so. Very recently I went. I used to go to recordings of the News Quiz and the Now Show all the time. I've been to a lot of TV recordings. My favorite ever recording, which featured on, is "Have I Got News for You?" with the first time Bruce Forsyth did it, and he's looking at an auto cue. He's trying to read this autocue and he's going da, 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 da. And I can't remember what he said, but I am crying with laughter. And he turned round above Ian Hislop's head where I was sitting, and he just went, "Please, please, this is satire." And you can hear me as clear as a bell.
Oh,
and
I've got to go look that up after
it's
this.
just wonderful. So I'm fascinated. The reason why I asked you about the radio is I'm fascinated how it all works. Sitting in an audience, you're right, you're in a different media environment, and it's fascinating because certainly when you're in a recording atmosphere, if something goes wrong, they have to do it again, and it's as though they haven't. It's the first time you've heard it, and that can be quite difficult, because if you're in a live environment, you just get away with it, and it's of the moment. It's fascinating. But I've had some wonderful times at recordings. I've just been to a recording of The Last Leg, and I have an infamous T-shirt that says "Richard Says Laugh," that without name dropping, Ivo Graham got me at the Edinburgh Fringe. And I was delighted because it says all about me. So I wore this T-shirt, and Adam Hills walked out, and he said, "Hello, Richard Says Laugh." This was before the recording, and Josh Whittaker went, "That's Richard Gill. He's the most infamous audience member in Britain with the loudest laugh." So of course I burst out laughing, and everybody cheered. So I'm like, this is extraordinary. It's all on a laugh, and that's my story. It's wonderful that we can support. One of the great things about the blog is listing all the different venues I've been to and all the gigs I've been to of particular comedians, watching them grow. So a classic example comes to mind where 30 years ago I saw Harry Hill downstairs at the King's Head. And to this day, he's got the greatest opening line I've ever heard. He was late for the show and he brushed past me and he stood up on the stage and he said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really sorry I'm late. I had to have a testicle brought down and got a laugh. And then he said, from Derby, and got an even bigger laugh. And when I met him 25 years later, I told him the story and he said, oh, Rich, he said, I still tell that routine now. And yet he'd been through the TV and he'd come back into the smaller club. It's fascinating. It's fascinating that you've got other strands that you can do with the media and things like that, So well done and congratulations, and keep going with the radio work.
Thank you.
How do you cope with any nerves before you go on stage? You mentioned nerves before. Do you still get them, or do you have a mechanism of controlling them at all?
Yeah, I think I still get them. I think you always get them, especially if you're a bit rusty, or whether it's a gig you've not done before, or a big venue or a big opportunity or whatever it is. I think there always will be different things that make you nervous. I think if you don't ever feel nervous, you're kind of not alive. I'd be really worried if I wasn't nervous. I think, I've probably died now. Okay, this is not going to be good. So the main thing I do is just try and pace around a lot. That's a very physical thing I do. I kind of just walk back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I have a lot of sort of adrenaline. It just means, right, I have to move, I have to stand up, I have to walk around. But it's always a thing. Like I'd say once you've got past, 150 gigs, like you always know, okay, it's going to be all right. Literally, as soon as you're on stage, you've got the first joke out, it'll be fine. It might not be the dream gig, it might not be perfect, but it'll be all right. No one's going to throw a tomato at me.
No. Would you say that as soon as you speak into the microphone, the nerves go?
No, I think after the first joke, you have to
get the first laugh.
Yeah, you get the first laugh out of the way, and then
then you're all right.
Usually,
because again, watching you, you're very confident. You give the impression that you're very confident on stage, even although you've got this. You can have this nervous demeanor in some of the stories that you tell. You're very, very confident, or you give the impression that you're very confident when you're in front of an audience. As I said earlier, you're one of these people who I think you walk out and you're determined to make the audience laugh, and you invariably do whenever I've seen you.
Yeah, well, I still love it. I still really enjoy it. It's still my favorite thing to do is perform comedy. So I'm always... you turn up to the gig and you want to do a good job. You never want to feel like you will literally want to give everything you can to make the gig go well. No one wants to go, what did you do with your night? Oh, I went to a gig and they hated me.
Exactly. As I say, it can only help you develop as a comedian. How do you remember all your routines? Do you have things written down? Do you remember things in your head? Do you have notebooks, anything like that?
Yeah, I would. If I'm doing it for the first time, I usually write on my hand. I'd write little words that help me think of, tennis, that's my routine about Andy Murray, which I don't have. I've just thought of it off the top of my head. Maybe I should write one now, I don't know. But you would write stuff that kind of make you think of different routines on your hand, and that can help. But also it's just the same way really that I revised as a kid at school. You just read it a lot and you write it out quite a lot, and you just go over it in your head and hope it sticks. Really, it's that funny thing where you don't realize it, but those things that you did, when you were 11 or 12, first doing exams, like that's always going to be the way you remember stuff. Really, I don't really think many people go, I've got a new way of remembering things this year. I think you just always use those same techniques, and it works most of the time.
I can imagine. Once you've said something, the pointer in your head will lead you on to the next bit.
Yeah, well, you try and before you go on, I always try and structure it in a way that
Yeah.
makes it easier to link together, because you want it to feel like it all makes sense and to feel like, and it needs to make sense. Like,
Yeah.
I think everyone's seen it when you see a comedian who's fairly new, and they might do one routine about marshmallows, and then the next joke is a joke about someone getting mugged or something, and
Yeah.
you can't put those next to each other. You need to learn, okay, what goes together, what builds to something, which things link, so it doesn't feel so jarring. You can't go, oh wait, hold on. Like, I mean maybe a nicer example is occasionally when people they do a routine about having a girlfriend, and then in the same set they'll do a routine about being single, and they don't always reference it, and you're like, right, so which are you? And you need to structure it so
Yeah.
it makes sense. Otherwise, people just go, who is this person?
Yeah.
Have they got an imaginary girlfriend? Are they okay?
Yeah. Other than this blog, the most creative thing I've ever done was write a play, and myself and my mate put it on for Comic Relief in 2007. And I've just found a script of it, and I'm hoping to resurrect it and maybe get it on at the Edinburgh Fringe. However, when we first performed it, it was written as monologue, scene, monologue, scene, monologue, scene. It's called The Applicant, and it's basically about me coming down from Carlisle to London, haven't got a job, and I end up getting my best job. But I start off with no knowledge at all in the interview, and I build myself up. So I'm like in the waiting room in the first scene, looking round, terrified, and the audience are there. So I start talking to them, and hence the monologue. I'd written this, and we rehearsed it for 10 weeks. And the first night we did 3 nights. First night I ran out, and I completely forgot the monologue, and I'd written the bloody thing.
Oh no!
I was like a rabbit in headlights. As soon as my mate come on, who played all the different interviews, I could bounce. You could bounce off them. But it was the most. I've never forgotten that night because I worked so hard to try and get it on. Do you ever have that experience with comedy? I don't know whether you do, where you instantly you can forget stuff and you have to bring things back.
Yeah, well, there are times when you're working on a show, and it could be during a preview, or it could be during like the 5th night of an Edinburgh run, where my partner she directs my show, and often I'd come off stage and go, oh, I didn't go as well, and she'd go, yeah, you forgot the bit about the dustbin, and you go, oh no. So that bit at the end where I call back to the dustbin, of course it didn't work, because they're like, why have you suddenly brought this out of nowhere? Like, so there's always times where you do that, and that's both the beauty and the curse of live performance, that you can't, like an absolute idiot.
Well, as long as I mean, the trick I found was you have to keep going. It's as simple as that. You can't walk off the set and, well, you could if you were completely lost, walk off and start again. There's been times I've seen comedians do that, but certainly I just cracked on, and as soon as my friend come on, as I say, I could banter off it. And the Thursday and the Friday I was word perfect.
Well, what's quite nice about that premise for a play is that you're supposed to be nervous at the start.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. So
you probably get away with it,
exactly.
messing up a bit at the start. They go, "Oh, this guy's a brilliant actor."
He's nervous for other reasons, but it's still, as I say, one of the most creative things I've done. And at least I got the best joke out, which was his name, which I called him Norman Oliver Hope. So with the rejection letters, it was Dear N.O. Hope. And so it was good. Anyway,
very good.
Yes, thank you. So you mentioned Edinburgh. Let's move on to Edinburgh. I am very, very lucky every year to have my holidays at the Edinburgh Fringe, and I go for a week or 5 days, and I see about 50 shows, and I'm exhausted by the end of it, and I need another holiday. But it's such an amazing experience that I've branched out this year, and I'm doing more festivals. I'm going to Hastings and Brighton, and Leicester's coming up. We're recording this in February. Tell me about, please, your first experience of the Edinburgh Fringe. Did you go up as a punter? Were you part of a comedy routine? How did it all work, and how did you first start going there?
The first time I went, I mean, the first 12, 13, I think the first 4 times I went was as a punter.
Right.
I've kind of been up every year since 2012, and the first 4 times were as a punter, and then I did a two-hander, and then I did a solo show, and it kind of grew from there. But I went for as a punter, what was it? Yeah, 2012. So I must have been 20. I think I was 20 years old,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it was the first time I'd been away from home on my own,
Right.
like a solo kind of holiday. Do you know what I mean? And it's the first
Yeah,
time I'd done anything like that in my life, and I just knew that I wanted to go to Edinburgh because I'd heard so much about it from different comedians on the radio or in interviews or, in sorts of different blogs and all sorts of different nonsense. Do you know
yeah,
what I mean? And you just go, this place sounds amazing. And it is. It's an incredible place for live comedy. It's the best place to see live comedy
yeah,
all year, anywhere in the world. Do you know what I mean? And, for all its flaws and lots of flaws, but behind the industry and stuff like that, it still is as an experience
yeah.
bloody
It is
incredible.
amazing.
Like you can bump into Jimmy Carr in the street, and then the next minute you're seeing someone do their first ever solo show and their
Yeah.
20th ever gig. It's crazy to have those two worlds so close together, and I think it's the only place really where you'll find that with British comedy.
It is an extraordinary place because as soon as you step off the train at Waverley, the atmosphere is there.
Yeah,
When even when you're walking out the even when you're walking out the station, and I mean, you are so right. Last year, we saw Alan Carr in a kilt walking down George Street, and then the next thing we're in a tiny little room with an unknown comedian, absolutely flooring it, going through the roof, and it's wonderful to experience watching the next big thing. I've seen Michael McIntyre in a hut there perform to 25 people. I've seen Sarah Millican perform in a very small venue. Russell Howard just starting out. It's the most incredible place. And 15 years ago when I first went, I knew a promoter, and I said to him, I'd like to have a go at stand-up comedy myself because whenever I go to the comedy, I can remember the jokes from the comedians, and I recite them in pubs and get laughs and everything. And he said, "Oh, come and have a go." He said, "We've got a gong show for old people on a Monday afternoon."
A gong
In
show for old
Haymarket.
people.
It couldn't be worse.
Are you sure this wasn't Dignitas or something? Horrific.
So, look, it gets so much better. I've told so many comedians. So I wrote this script where I used to drive a car in Carlisle, and all about me being accident prone in the car, and he loved it. And he said, right, go on. You've got 3 minutes, and you might get gonged off, but go and give it your all. Right? So I walked out. It was a Monday afternoon. There's an old fella sitting at the back. There's 3 people in the crowd, and an old fella at the back. And I walked on, and I said, "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. People think I look like Eddie the Eagle Edwards, the ski jumper, but I can't see the resemblance myself." And of course, the joke is I am his double. And the old bloke at the back just went, "Fuck off!" And I walked up to my own footsteps, and the promoter said, "Have another go, Rich, have another go." So I did it. A similar thing happened, and I said, "I don't know whether never say never again, but my calling is in the audience watching you all support." But it was the most amazing experience. But I don't know whether I'll ever do it again.
was the old bloke Eddie himself?
I have met him, yes.
Oh, but it wasn't him in the audience who was telling
No,
him to
no,
fuck
no,
off.
no, no. But where I went to college at Stoke when he was massive in the Winter Olympics,
Hmm.
and when it finished, he opened a radio rentals in Stoke, and I met him, and I shook his hand, and he went, "Bloody hell." I said, "I know." I said, "People are stopping me in the street. I'm your double, and I can't ski either." Very funny, but everybody's got their own double. Anyway, let's move on from Edinburgh, but it is an amazing experience. Um, to date, what's been your comedy highlight?
Oh, that's tricky. I mean, yeah, it's tempting just to go back to Edinburgh, to be honest, because it's I mean, not just Edinburgh, but that feeling where you do your own show and people are there just to see you, and it goes really well and they really enjoy it, is it's always going to be the best feeling. Like that's what I love about comedy. I kind of, think I fell in love with comedy probably, partly the entry was kind of things like Mock the Week or Live at the Apollo, but really like what really stays with me and resonates is like the hour-long shows and that kind of feeling of like, God, like you can either be told a story or just have a great time over an hour with just this one person on stage, and I think that's amazing. And that still is the best feeling when you do your own solo show and it goes well because it's just you, and it's just amazing. It's just the best thing in the world.
I can
I love
tell
it.
just from you saying, it must be incredible. And the fact that certainly at Edinburgh you can do up to 25 nights, that
Mm-hmm.
sounds exhausting and knackering, but you
Mm-hmm.
must get the adrenaline to keep going because of the reasons that you've said.
Yeah, well, I mean, the mad thing about Edinburgh is that if you do it 20 nights in a row, that most of us seem to, is that the difference in how you feel with 24 hours apart. Like one show can go quite badly and you want to quit comedy. The next show goes really well and you feel like you're the king of the world. And
Yeah.
it's like there's 24 hours apart. It's the same material, the same jokes, the same venue, the same time, the same all of this, but just a different audience or a different day or whatever it is. And it's utterly bewildering because even after doing so many gigs, you still can't always work out why it is one way and why it isn't
Yeah.
another way. It's utterly perplexing sometimes because you're like, I don't. There's sometimes where you come off stage and you go, no, I performed that really well. What's wrong? You just feel
Would,
so
would
confused.
would you say the old cliche that it is like a drug fueled experience when it goes so well you keep wanting more. It's like taking a drug that people keep doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's addictive,
Yeah.
in that sense. And I think, it's just such a nice feeling that you're like, of course you'd want to do it hundreds and thousands of times if you enjoy it. And
It's certainly wonderful watching something special because, as I say, you're exhausted from actually watching it. Never mind performing it. Because you've had such a great time that you think this is amazing. I always remember watching Peter Kay when he first started out in Manchester, and he was on a bill of 5 acts, and he was fourth on. And I said to my mate, "This lad's going to be a superstar." And I laughed so hard at him, I missed the fifth act. And about 6 months later, I had to go up to Dave Gorman and apologise that I'd missed his act through laughing. So I made a point of going to go and see him again, and he was as good.
I mean, that's a great gig, isn't it?
If you see people that have just got it, it's incredible, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. Do you have any ambitions as a comedian? Would you like to be on TV? Would you been on radio? Would you like your own sitcom? Anything like that?
I think a lot of these things you kind of feel like, yeah, of course you'd want to do everything. Like I'm always very torn. Whereas part of me, part of you has that mega ambitious. I want to be. I'm sorry, you might be able to hear my partner's neighbours shouting at the moment. I don't know if that's coming
Not at
through.
all. It's fine. It's absolutely fine.
Literally, I'm getting heckled even when I'm doing a podcast, apparently.
If you're fine carrying on, that's fine.
Just so the listeners know, that's what that is. It's not, you know. But yeah, I think it's that thing where part of your brain wants to be, the kind of sort of Russell Brand Hollywood superstar
Yeah, yeah.
in mega films, in TV, and multi-million pounds and this incredible level. But then there's also part of you that just goes like, yeah, if I can make a living doing this, then that's beautiful. That's amazing. That is the dream. That's the dream when you first fall in love with it. You're like, yeah, if I can do that as a job, then bloody amazing. Like, my mum worked at Boots for 40 years, and I'm like, I'd far rather do this than something like that. I'd feel very lucky if I just, earned 10 grand a year doing this for the rest of my life. You're like, well, that's a success. So I'm kind of always torn between the two, both wanting to go, yeah, I've got my own sitcom, I've been in films, I've done all this, but also being like, yeah, but I do just love stand up. I just love the live stuff. I love doing live shows. I love doing that stuff. So, I mean, it's kind of a yes, I'd love to do that, but also I don't mind if it happens or not, because a lot of it's out of your hands. Literally, if someone tomorrow comes up to me and goes, we want you to write a sitcom, I'll write it. But you need these opportunities to appear, I guess.
I'm so pleased for you because, like me, you seem extraordinarily passionate about it.
Yeah.
And that is shining through just talking to you now.
Yeah, well, I love, I love stand up. That's what I love more than any of the rest of it. Like
Yeah.
I think, if I could choose between um doing a stand up gig that pays me 100 quid or doing an acting job that pays me 10 grand or whatever, I'd enjoy the stand up one more. Do you know what I mean? Even though obviously
That's great.
the money would be nice. I'd like the
Yeah,
money.
yeah.
I'm not gonna. I wouldn't turn it down. But at the same time, you're like, it's the stand up that really drives me, that I really enjoy, and that's the thing I really love doing. And all the other stuff is just kind of extras. It's kind of, they'd be great in terms of building your audience and making yourself more financially stable. But
Yeah, yeah.
really, like as long as you can do stuff on stage, that's what's great.
That's brilliant. Did you have comedy growing up? In presumably your parents' house. Did you have comedy growing up? Did they like comedy or?
Um, I mean, not they weren't sort of crazy about what the kind of industry of British comedy stuff that they liked Only Fools and Horses,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Dad really liked The Young Ones, and
yeah.
they really liked stuff like Some Mothers Do Have 'Em, and we watched My Family when that was on TV, the
That's
sitcom.
great.
So we would sit as a family and watch stuff like that on telly. But it's not like they were crazy big fans of going
No,
to live gigs. I think the first time they saw a live stand up was probably seeing me. Like they weren't those type of people who'd go, we want to go watch a live stand up thing. But they always, we liked comedy, and I always think it's strange if people don't watch any comedy. I think I don't understand those people. Occasionally you meet these people and they go, "Oh, I don't really like comedy," and I go, "What the hell is wrong with you, mate?"
I can't fathom that.
It's like, I don't like joy and
Yeah,
laughter.
my mum and dad loved it, and I can remember taking both of them to see Victoria Wood at the Royal Albert Hall, and they were crying at her. And my mum was a massive fan of Freddie Starr, and she loved Graham Norton, and it was like, this is extraordinary because you wouldn't think with the characters and the generations growing up that they'd love this daft comedy, but it was funny and it would just make you laugh. It was extraordinary. Who are your favorite comedians, past and present? And
Oh,
Big question.
like I mentioned them earlier, and I always like to mention them, the Chuckle Brothers,
Yes,
because
superb.
I think they're very underrated as comic performers, and like in terms of people who had a proper crazy long career, like they, I mean, Paul's still going, obviously, but sadly Barry isn't. But their career together was as long as your career watching comedy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
They were
yeah.
doing stuff live and on telly for decades, and I just think that stuff's always really important because when someone goes, "Who are your favorite comedians?" like in your head, my brain would maybe go to like a Russell Howard or a John Richardson or people who were like the early influences from stand up. But really, the earlier influences was stuff like the Chuckle Brothers on telly as a kid. So I'd probably say they're up there absolutely because
That's a fantastic answer. I so agree that they are very underrated. I never got a chance to see them, but I did see Cannon and Ball, who I loved in the 80s, and we saw them in pantomime, and they were in the pub afterwards, and I wish I'd got a photo with them, but I didn't. But I went up to them, and I said, "It's so good to see you still working after so long."
yeah.
And Bobby Ball turned to me, God bless him, and he did one of his infamous grins, and he went, "We're still working, cocker." And that's a memory I will treasure.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And it's like that with the "to me to you." Whenever you
Yeah,
see the Chuckle Brothers on TV doing that, you think there's so much more to this act than just that catchphrase because
yeah, there is.
they were the timing was immaculate and very funny visual comics. Very
Yeah,
very.
very, very good.
My first ever gig was 1974. I'm 55 years old. And my first ever gig was 1974. It was Les Dawson with with my mum and dad at Scarborough.
Wow.
And then a year later we saw Tommy Cooper, and I got the buzz for it.
So
And
how old were you?
Tommy, I would be 7 when I saw Les
Oh
Dawson,
my gosh,
and
that's
8
amazing.
when I saw Tommy Cooper. And I can remember stories about both of them, but one of my favourite stories was Tommy Cooper. The curtains opened. He was lying on a bed, and there was one woman in the crowd crying with laughter. Whether or not she was a plant, it was perfect. And it just trickled round, and everybody was crying, and he hadn't done a thing. And he's lying there. And after about 3 or 4 minutes, with perfect timing, he popped his head up. He went, "What? Somebody come on!" It was just
Oh
priceless.
man.
And Les Dawson he's in my top 5. I just thought he was wonderful with the piano and the characters, and he's just a wonderful, funny man. And then the reason why I got the laugh was when another holiday we went to Torquay, and as a treat we went to see Tom O'Connor, one of these 70s typical club comedians, and he came on. He was all right. He did his patter, he did his jokes, and he must have said something that made me laugh out loud at him, because I went ha, and it flummoxed him, and he had to walk off stage, come back on, like I said earlier. And I'm like, "Was that me? Jesus!" And
I mean, I
then
love how
it grew from there.
you don't heckle people, but you accidentally like heckle them
Actually,
with your
not,
laughter.
and it heckles them off.
Yeah.
But through college, we saw Ben Elton, we saw Rick Mail, he was amazing, and then French and Saunders, Frank Skinner. My first year in London, we used to go to the Comedy Store all the time, and on the first bill was Richard Morton, Phil Jupiter, Linda Smith, God bless her, and
Wow.
Steve Gribbin, and we used to go and see Linda Smith a lot at the news quiz, and then all the comedy clubs we started going to them. So it was Headliners, it was the Balham Banana Cabaret, it was the Comedy Store, it was Jongleurs when it was open. And then in right up to date, it's all the comedians. Always Be Comedy is a major thing. Certainly with the online shows, I used to go to the Happy Mondays with Sean James. I used to go to the Always Be Comedy online, and I'd go to Jarlath Regan's Irish Comedy Night on a Friday, and it's just grown from there. It's they as I say, I should get this laugh insured, because I amaze myself how how it's just took off. You know, this is extraordinary. But I think overall, with the support, I think I've found a niche with this, because nobody either could be bothered to do it or have the time to write about all their experiences watching all you wonderful people getting up and doing it. So thank you very much.
Oh, bless you, mate. Well, thank you for supporting so much comedy. Without you, it'd be a much quieter audience.
Exactly. Like me, just having said all that, like me, do you go to a lot of comedy shows as a member of the audience?
Oh,
even before you were a comedian, or?
I mean, I'd say like a lot of comedians, I'd probably go to less just as an audience member, purely because you gig quite a lot, so you see a lot of comedy anyway, and because you gig a lot, you have less time to go to see shows. You know, if you're gigging on a Friday, it means you can't go and see a show on a Friday. But I see a lot. I see a lot of stuff. Like when I'm in Edinburgh, I would see 50 odd shows as well. It was similar to you. I'd see a lot of shows, and I'm someone who I like to watch a lot of comedy, whether it's a sitcom or whether it's a DVD or a special on YouTube or a live stream on Next Up or something. Like, I'm probably, any day I'm not gigging this month in February, I'd probably log into Next Up and see what they're streaming, because I just love watching live comedy. So I probably, not quite as many as you, but I see a lot. I see a lot of stuff because again, it's that wonderful kind of beautiful thing where it's a mix between like your passion and the thing you really love, but also it's important for your own craft and your own work to know what other people are doing. So it's good for two reasons to go, and you enjoy it, but also okay, I'm glad I know about that person, because it means that I shouldn't do a material about garlic bread or whatever it is.
Yeah. If you're on a bill, would you stay and watch the other comedians?
Yes, as long as I don't have to rush and get a train home or double up and do another gig. I'll always stay and watch, because again, that's an early thing I took from when I first did open mic gigs, is that you've learned a lot from watching all the other comedians. You learn from what they do right and what they do wrong, and it's that weird thing when you do open mic gigs. There's always those people who would come, they'd do their spot in the first half and then just leave, and it meant they wouldn't see the headliner. And I was like, but that's who you learn from the most. You learn from that experience act at the end, what they do well in the same room, usually with a smaller audience, because half the audience have left because they're open mic comedians who just want to do their spot and leave. But you learn so much from watching. Even when I've done stand up regularly for about 8 years now, you still learn every single time you see someone new, and you learn of new things you could try or do, or you just have a nice time. Literally, sometimes you don't learn anything, but you go, oh, but they're proper funny. Like,
one of the things I love to do is discover new comedy clubs, and the most recent one, I suppose, is Sofa So Funny, which you've headlined twice. I've seen you headline twice, and you've been amazing.
Thank you, mate.
Thank you very much. You've certainly learnt your craft well, and you're very good at what you do.
Oh, bless you, mate. Well, I mean, also, shout out to Leslie Gold, who always puts together a really good bill and does a great job emceeing as well.
Her and Nick Kirk have both done an interview here, and it was wonderful. So good luck to her. Yeah, she's really good.
Thank you, mate.
It's absolutely. This has been absolutely wonderful talking to you. I've so much enjoyed it. I hope you have.
Yeah, it's been great.
Is there anything else you would like to say? Do you have a podcast? What's your social media handle? Anything like that?
I mean, it's just my name, Tom Mayhew, on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and all those different things. I think you can still hear my Radio 4 series. The first series is on my YouTube channel, and the second series is on BBC Sounds. So if you want to check that out, feel free. And by the time this is out, I should probably have a special on Next Up. We filmed it last year, and it's in. I mean, it's that thing where Rich has a big list of podcasts to put out, and Next Up have a big list of comedy specials to edit. So it's a bit of a race to see, will my special be edited before this podcast comes out? Who knows? But
hopefully.
So yeah,
I was just going to say, listen, my friend, thank you so much for your time.
That's all right.
And I'm looking forward very much to seeing you live again soon.
That's all right. I'll see you very soon in London, or maybe in Leicester or Edinburgh, or
definitely
wherever else we go.
You take care, my friend, and all the best to you.
You too, mate.
Thanks a lot now.